Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. One of the big questions going into Modern Warfare 3 is how similar or different the game might be to the title that we have just played. Even over just the last couple of years, many top players in the CDL such as aBeZy have varied quite wildly in how good they've been from one game to the next. Shotzzy though reckons that Pred, their new recruit to OpTic, will have no such issues because his playstyle seems to work in absolutely every single game, and it certainly will as far as he's concerned going forward into Modern Warfare 3. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Just wanted to give a quick update on Crimsix. I know that many people have been wondering what's going on with his lip, right? Because his upper lip and the swelling and all this stuff that's been going on for the last couple of years. He's had loads of tests on this and he's been diagnosed with a load of different things, but apparently they just can't seem to figure it out, and everything they test just comes back negative. So yeah, wishing the best for Crimsix, but as he says, just want to go back to normal. It's been over 2 years now since this started to occur, and they still don't really know what's causing it to happen. So yeah, unfortunate. Hoping that obviously it works out for Crim, but it's definitely been a long time. Now, Crim was replying to this, and I thought this is pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie, that I see put together here in Breaking Points. So as I mentioned earlier today, the impression farming, right? And here we go again. So did OpTic build the ultimate flow state team? So this stat here is the hardpoint flow state index. Now, what this typically is referred to is the X factor index. This is how people have usually described this. So the X factor refers to how good a player's KD is when they lose and how good is their KD when they win a map. So for example here for Pred, when he loses a map, on average he has a 0.91 KD. When he wins a map, he has a 1.33. So this is usually considered to be the X factor, where when this player goes off, they win, and when he doesn't, they lose. And there's a big differential between when they win or lose what the KD tends to be. Now, you can also look at this from another perspective of this whole flow state thing, right? Now, flow state is a legitimate psychological, it's actually a very interesting phenomenon if you guys don't know much about it. But it was been talked about an awful lot in the COD space in recent times. And I guess the theory is that's been trying to present it here, that when you're in the flow state, then you're dropping crazy numbers and you win, and when you're not, you lose. But, I'm not sure this analysis really checks out, but I'm not sure that it was necessarily intended to. And, but it is interesting nonetheless to say that the two OpTic SMGs do have the highest differential. Call it flow state or not, they do have the highest differential between their KDs and wins and losses in the entire league. Brack is next, then Cellium actually, who has a 1.45 when they win a hardpoint map, which is just completely outrageous. And he still has a positive KD when they lose, which is something else. And then even Donnie Tempest here as well. But we did see some replies here, right? As Crim says, like, posts like these are why CDL management is misguided, because there is the theory that a lot of the managers and the decision makers in the CDL are just using the Lion Man cards. They're looking at stats like this and actually thinking that it's relevant. And, Crim doesn't seem to necessarily agree. Some of the dumbest stuff imaginable. And yet this one apparently still seems to take the cake. Also, just from Ghosty real quick, I know there's been some discussions about where Ghosty's going to be going. We think he's going to be joining Thieves. We don't exactly know when or when the announcement might be, but that's definitely one to stay tuned for. And there's been lots of talk lately about exactly how the OpTic team might be looking going forward. Octane's given his thoughts on Kenny compared to Ghosty, whether that's an upgrade or whether that's not. But I do wonder, going into next year's game, is it going to be exactly the same in playstyle to this year's, or is it going to be somewhat different? There's certain players over the last few years, and Crimsix has made this thought known as well during the Cold War season, when he said that Simp and aBeZy are basically slide cancel merchants, and I'm sure that he was, talking a little, he was joking around a little bit there, because obviously those guys are going to be good whatever they play to some degree. But it must be said that this most recent game, there was no slide cancel. The slide cancel next year is going to be back to our understanding. The movement mechanics might be somewhat different, and every COD is slightly different, and some players every year get slightly better or slightly worse, and in some transitions between titles get very much better or very much worse. For example, going from jetpacks back to boots on the ground definitely helped, and people were wondering, oh, it's not going to make much difference, but going back onto World War II several years ago, it was very clear that players like JCap, players like Aches got significantly better in that situation than in the Jetpack era that had been happening previously. And certain players like Hook, for example, who had dominated Advanced Warfare, just couldn't really put the pieces together when it went back to boots on the ground, at least initially. So Shotzzy does a little bit of leaking here on the OpTic podcast and basically talks about this Modern Warfare 3 video they've got coming up, I'm guessing. Now, it seems like they've gone back to the original MW3 game, right, rather than the upcoming one, and they've played that as a team, or they've had some sort of 2v2 or whatever they've done. Sounds pretty entertaining anyway. They played it with Pred, clearly, and Shotzzy says that Pred's playstyle is just, because we know how Pred plays in these modern games. He knows how to ride the balance really well of playing fast and playing, you know, for kills when he needs to. Reminds me a lot of Scump from back in the day, and also in terms of like what HyDra does in the present day. Aggressive when he needs to be, but knows when to slow down, play a corner, lay down and play for kills, and that playstyle has served Pred very well for the last 2 seasons, Vanguard and Modern Warfare 2. Shotzzy reckons he does the same thing when he goes back to play other games as well, and that ratty playstyle probably works really well in those older games, and I imagine still will in the upcoming titles, given that they're very similar to what we've just played, you would imagine.
Obviously, the Off-Season 2 is coming out, which is essentially Shotzzy playing Black Ops 2 with Seth. Last year, he lost the first round. Will Pred be good at this thing, do you think?
He better be.
I just read that.
I'm the returning champion.
Nah, yo, Pred, dude, he's comedy, bro. Every game that he plays, like, for example, we played, wait, can I even say that? The what? MW3 that we played? Did I say that?
Yeah, you can say what you want.
Because, like, it's not even out, right? Do people know it's coming out?
Wait, you guys played MW3?
Yeah.
No, not the new one.
Not the new one.
Yeah, the old one.
Okay, and?
Yeah, and, dude, his playstyle.
Oh, you were saying
yo, you could only imagine his playstyle. Like, literally ironing, laying down, and, like, bro, it's literally the same gameplay as it is. And, like,
you liked it?
You guys cheesed this, though. I'm not going to lie.
TacticalRab. Use this a lot of the OpTic, you know, happenings to, but he's offering.
Yeah, he does.
But he's offering like news and his opinion on it. Sometimes he he leaves the witness a lot on some of the cases.
My thumbnail is abused on that guy's YouTube channel. Abused, bro. Like, he's got to give me a cut at this point. Like, I ain't even asking for a lot. It's like 2 to 5%. We could talk, or maybe a steak dinner at an event. He's been coming out. You know,
I haven't seen him. I met him once. Me and Former were wrecking.
He might beat your ass. He's a big guy.
No, he's a tall guy. He's tall. Not a big guy.
Oh,
tall and lanky.
I mean, those are the ones you bet on. But you know, there are times where people like
maybe some Ruth's Chris rap.
Yeah, no, steakhouses are boring.
Maybe
we're not going to Ruth's Chris when we can go to.
You're not going.
Amen.
I'm going.
Amen. I'm
maybe
not going.
Ribeye Chef's Choice.
Actually, never mind.
No,
I'm not
going, and neither is the company card.
It's on TacticalRab's card.
It's on TacticalRab's card. TacticalRab, if you want to take us to dinner,
don't take us out.
We're open to it. Anyway, long story short.
Also, I kind of did preempt that a little bit in what we discussed the other day, right? With you know, giving the boys the steak dinner. But yeah, if there is a Texas event, as there better be, then we'll have to get that sorted. I'll do a tweet or something today. We'll have to try and find a way to get that sorted. Bring Octane along as well or something. I don't know. But that'll be a good time. And you know, Hex seems down, so absolutely I'm down to make that happen. But of course, Scump & Co. They won at the Black Ops 2 Throwback 20 last season with RCT's Pristini and OpTic Big Timer, and Scump took the dub. And this time, Scump's team is slightly different with Scump, Karma, Shotzzy, and Pred. So this is what Scump's saying, like, look, this guy Pred better be good at this, you know, Black Ops 2, because if he's not, we're gonna lose again. Like, I've got a title to defend, as it were. But it's always a bit of a question going into a new season, and I think especially because the game doesn't even come out for a long time. The beta hasn't been played, the alpha hasn't been played by any of the pro players, but yet their team is set already. And it's always when you wonder, yeah, in an ideal world, they'd be able to play the game and then know who's good, who's bad, and then sign players. This is quite often what teams do with their substitute, right? They will play the game at the start, then, you know, they'll see who's good in challenges and then sign them as their sub because, you know, they'll get the best player that looks pretty good at this particular title. Because every year, some players get better, some players get worse. You see this in challenges a lot as well. I don't know, I talked about Wardy earlier today, but Wardy had such a good challenges year in in Vanguard, this year wasn't seemingly quite so good. Maybe that wasn't just him being worse as a player, maybe it was teammates, maybe there are other factors, but it always is the case to some degree. And Hook, for example, has been known for doing this. We're putting together a documentary on Breaking Point right now about Hook's career, and he was so unbelievably good at Advanced Warfare, and I'm sure he would have been as well at Black Ops 3 Infinite Warfare, but he couldn't play those games because he was under 18 at the time. He came back for World War II, people expected him to be godlike, and he just wasn't really. Like, he was nowhere near, to be honest, the S-tier player that people expected. He was still pretty good that season, and probably somewhat underrated actually in terms of like his ability on those games, but you know, he was considered to be definitely significantly worse than he was a couple of years prior before he stepped away to Halo with the age restriction coming in for the CWL. And in more recent times, we've seen other examples. For example, aBeZy has been, I mean, he was unbelievable in Cold War, right? Up there with Simp in terms of how good he was. And this is the most recent season here in Modern Warfare 2, where aBeZy, one of the best players in the game, potentially MVP candidate. Look at that search of 1.22, hardpoint control. Numbers are just emphatic, but these were his numbers last year in Vanguard, and this is LAN only, but it gets a similar point across, right? Only an 83 overall, a 0.9 in hardpoint, 0.96 in search, not the greatest kills or damage per 10 and everything like this. So, and I think the reason for this is because aBeZy didn't really like Vanguard. I think he made that quite clear, and he basically said after Vanguard, like, all right, I'm never taking a game that, you know, not exactly unseriously, but he didn't put in all the time that he thinks he probably should have done, and it was affecting his performance. But we certainly did see that aBeZy went from being godlike in Cold War to, you know, pretty, not exactly mid in Vanguard, he was still very good, but definitely not like top 5 player caliber, and then went back to being insanely good in the most recent title here in Modern Warfare 2, being one of the best players in the game. So we do tend to see this with even players like aBeZy, that on a year-to-year basis, they can fluctuate quite a bit in terms of how good they are. And when you are building a team for the new season, you really want to ensure that whoever you're signing is going to be good at every game that you're going to play, regardless of what it is. And there's certain players that will be like that, and there's certain play styles that will be like that. Certain players, for example, even Shotzzy you can discuss as well. Certain games will suit Shotzzy better than others. The slide cancelling coming back here in this current game will probably favour Shotzzy to some degree. Pred, I think his playstyle will work on any game, as it did with Scump back in the day. You put Scump on Black Ops 2, you put him on Modern Warfare 3, you put him on Ghost, doesn't matter, he's going to be great. You chuck Scump on Advanced Warfare, and he becomes, you know, probably has one of the best individual seasons of all time. So, you know, that type of playstyle, and I think Pred has at least some part of that as well. And maybe part of that with Pred is because, you know, he grew up watching Scump, right? He's made this clear before. But I think the question of whether their SMGs are going to be good at this upcoming game is, you know, shouldn't be too much of a factor, and Shotzzy seems to believe that that is most certainly going to be the case. Just a couple of things to close out with. I thought this was kind of crazy. Speaking of those last 3 seasons, aBeZy does appear on this list actually with a lot of the other FaZe guys. Shotzzy and Dashy here as well, but number 1 by quite some margin since Cold War, so this is over the last 3 seasons, is Insight with 23 clutches in Search and Destroy. Simp has 19, aBeZy has 18, RCs has 17, Cell has 16, Slash has 15, so, you know, pretty much all down, but then Insight is way ahead of the rest, and partly I'm sure that's like the way the team is set up. Insight often will find himself last alive, but he's also a really good Search and Destroy player, and that definitely goes quite a long way as well. And just to close out with this, I thought was interesting, which team had the most hardpoint wins during the most recent season? I think I chose quite, you know, preemptively on this, because I was like, all right, it's got to be between OpTic and New York. That was the way I was looking at it, because OpTic were great at hardpoint, and I picked OpTic actually to win this one. But then I thought, you know what, OpTic, often the way these are dialed out, and we saw the other day that FaZe have more series wins than LA Guerrillas have series plays, and in the CDL era, and that's because they make it deep in tournaments. And if you're New York and you're making a lot of finals and you're making deep runs in tournaments, as they did at the end of the year and OpTic didn't, let's be honest, then you play more hardpoints. So I imagine OpTic were leading this category in hardpoint stats going into champs probably, or going into Major 5 certainly, but Subliners did overtake them in the final couple of events. They had 53 hardpoint wins, OpTic had 49, and then Toronto and FaZe both had 46. So yeah, it was actually New York with the most, largely because they just made deeper runs in tournaments at the end of the season. But very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.